Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. Coming up on the programme this week.
Across the board for everybody that was involved, they rated that after our sessions, their positive emotions went up and then negative emotions went down, which was really, really great to see.
It's not just about making sure they've got enough food. It's about looking after them, making sure they're comfortable. And actually, and here's the silly question, isn't that about mental health, the mental health and well-being of the animals?
We had a group who came in at the end of September, and the teacher literally just said this was exactly what the children needed after lockdown, after COVID. But what we can do is just provide that little bit of lift and that little bit of sparkle for them, which can really help them.
And I'll be reminding you how you can make connections with mental health organisations within your community. It's Mental Health Monday.
Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle.
Tackling the stigma.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mental Health Monday with me, Mick Coyle, and this is our 2020 Christmas special. Yeah, just a few days to go before the big day as we put this out, and I really hope you have as good a time as is possible during the times ahead of us and the days ahead of us, given everything that's gone on in the world and, of course, the new rules that are in place. And, of course, it can be a difficult time. There's always, at the end of the podcast, the link to those various services that you might want to reach out to at this particular time. I spoke to the Samaritans last week. They got 10,000 calls on Christmas Day alone last year. Their number 116123. And on the first podcast of next year, I'll be speaking to the TV doctor, Dr. Zoe Williams. She's talking about the NHS talking therapy services, which are available. Now, they're available now. The podcast comes out on like the 4th of January, but I just wanted to tell you about it now, just in case you wanted to maybe jump onto one of the relatively short waiting lists, by the way, around about 6 weeks. Self-referral or via your GP. You just type in NHS talking therapies into any search engine. You'll get a link to the page where you can make those connections. And the first podcast of 2021 will talk through what the service is, how it's going to work. But like I say, if you want to find out about it now, jump on board. So this week's podcast is going to be the Christmas special. We're going to speak to an organisation you might not associate with mental health, but they've got a programme in place now which has actually proved to be really successful. I'm talking about Knowsley Safari Park. Now, they, as a very, very well-known visitor attraction, attract many, many thousands of people each and every year. But they've also got a special programme in place that focuses on the mental health and well-being of their visitors as well. And Nikki Burton Mallott is the person behind it. She's going to explain exactly what they do, how they do it, and how they work in that wonderful world of safari and the zoo into that story around mental health. She's very keen to work with partner organisations within the local community. I'm sure she'd be really warm to the idea of you getting in contact with them if you work for one of those organisations. Thanks so much for your support in 2020 with Mental Health Monday. We've had a real roller coaster of a year, and of course me now doing the show sort of on my own as the podcast without the production team behind me has changed things up in the last 6 months, but really, really positive listener figures for the last month in particular. It's been absolutely huge. So thank you so much to everybody for sharing, talking about it. If you are listening, please do share it on social media. Tell people you're listening to Mental Health Monday, hashtag Mental Health Monday, and hopefully even more people will check out the programme in 2021. Really important conversations. First up, Nikki Burton Mallott from Knowsley Safari Park. So, Nikki's going to explain first and foremost, what's the link between well-being and a safari park?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And do you know what, like sometimes even within the safari or within the kind of zoological industry, when I start to talk about mental health, because it is something that I'm very passionate about, people do like you say, stop and think, well, hang on a minute, how do they connect together? And I think that's because they mainly think of us as a visitor attraction, which of course we are, and we offer a great day out. We do obviously do an awful amount of conservation work as well. But beside that as well, we are a lovely natural space. We've got lots of animals. And actually, it has been shown repeatedly that those things can have a really, really good effect on people's well-being and on people's mental health. I think it's just perhaps because of the first two things, because of the kind of attraction element and because of the conservation element, people don't really put us in the same category as they might do, say, a botanical garden or a woodland walk or something like that. And so I'm actually sort of saying, well, no, there's an awful amount of a lot of similarities between the two. And when you start to think of us in that kind of remit, I think that makes sense, that actually we are broadening our programmes to touch on mental health and well-being.
Absolutely. I wonder if part of it as well is that it's almost like the traditional TV way of showing a safari park is the family trapped in the car with the monkeys tearing off the windscreen wipers, and whether or not people think of that and go, that seems too stressful for it to be good for my mental health.
Maybe you could be right.
And in terms of that, seeing wildlife and the opportunities that brings with us, and of course, you guys being so close to such sort of major urban hubs, there are opportunities there that families have taken, for years and years and years to go and do that. And I guess that is a mental health thing, isn't it? Because it's about seeing something that's awe-inspiring, seeing something that makes you smile, that gives you good memories as well, as much as anything.
Exactly, yeah. And something, so I lead the education department at Knowsley, and something that I'm also very passionate about is when I say education, people automatically assume and think, oh, okay, so you teach people about the animals. So they think of it as very factual content, knowing what species the animals are, what they eat, where they come from, how they adapted. And don't get me wrong, that is part of what we do. But actually, it doesn't take much to kind of think, well, actually learning is not just retaining factual knowledge. Learning can be all kinds of different things. And a huge part of that is emotional connection to nature, that kind of tug of being like, wow, this is amazing, this is really cool. And actually, I would always say that as an educator, that is far more important to me when we have our children come in and do our classroom sessions. If they can't quite remember, what something eats, do you know what? No, doesn't matter, no worries. But if they come out and say, oh, wow, that was amazing, that was so cool, I can't wait to tell people about it. That kind of connection and that emotional engagement, I think, is really, really important, because not only would you want them to have that good experience, but we're also hoping that will then lead to them thinking, oh, do you know what? I'm going to explore nature a little bit further, which is good for nature, but it's also good for them as people as well. And then, like you said, in terms of that kind of family social experience as well, we know that, being lonely can have a really detrimental effect on your mental health and well-being. So having those social connections, having that shared experience as well is also really important. So there's a lot of value in that safari park visit that can be good for your mental health, even if you aren't going with that intention. We know that can have a really positive effect. I mean, certainly some of the programs that we've run, so the one that I mentioned with Mind, we rated everybody's well-being before and after the session. So this was done by themselves. We used a specific tool developed by University College London, which was rating positive and negative emotions. And we found across the board for everybody that was involved, they rated that after our sessions, their positive emotions went up and then negative emotions went down, which was really, really great to see. We also did some other stats at so asked them some questions at the beginning of the course, which was 5 weeks, and some at the end. And we also found there were some statistically significant, I had to slow down to say that, some changes actually in terms of providing that longer term effect, which was brilliant. Because I think we were aware of, well, you come and spend a few hours with us, that probably is going to have that positive effect, and we proved that we had the stats to demonstrate that. But actually, what's the difference between the beginning and the end of the 5-week course? And we did see some longer term changes. I think the goal for me now, in kind of my science researchy head, is to get more people through that program, to extend the program, and let's kind of see if we can have a more statistical long-term impact. That is the next thing that we want to be demonstrating.
And when you've got like a classroom of children or young people in front of you, and you're offering them that experience and they're having that experience, are you saying to them, this is about your mental health? Or are you flagging the fact that, they are feeling positive and actually that's a positive thing? Or do you just leave it to be a natural reaction, if you like?
I think it very often can be led by the group. I mean, pre-COVID, we had 25,000 children a year visitors at the safari park just on school trips. And we do have to be led by them. And that's the same goes for their interests or kind of what we're doing. So our educators are trained to follow the interests of the children. So we do a program called Wellbeing Through Wildlife, which is all designed to focus on the 6 areas of wellbeing, and their day and the activities are designed around it. So we will do the conventional things. They will talk about, oh, this is the giraffe, this is the meerkats, this is where they live, and things like that. But then we'll also stop and we do what's called take a minute. So it might be that we're in the middle of the session and we will take a minute. And depending on where we are, we might be closing our eyes and looking at, I was going to say looking at the clouds. I don't mean that because you can't do that with your eyes shut. You might be closing your eyes and smelling the animals, which is, always a bit interesting when you're at a safari park, or looking at the clouds or feeling the leaves with your hands. and just kind of encouraging the children to just take that minute and just enjoy nature. And then naturally, if the children sort of ask and say, well, hang on a minute, why are we doing this? What's going on? We can kind of explore that a little bit with them. But if not, most of the children actually just kind of enjoy that opportunity to take in the experience rather than being frog marched round, being like, we need to do this, 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 and this. They actually enjoy that. And they benefit more from doing that rather than being rushed around.
I think it's interesting that, because I think then you'll have young people who associate the idea of well-being, and when they hear about it, then in the future they'll be reminded, hopefully, of a good day out that they had, or where they'll associate it with rhinos, or they'll associate it with giraffes. Whereas actually a lot of people, I still think, from older generations, associate mental health and well-being with, real issues, problems, things that are going to grind you down. Well, actually that changes the mindset, doesn't it? That actually well-being can be about the day you had out at the safari park and what the camels smelled like.
Exactly, yeah. And I think it's important that actually that preserving your well-being is something that we all need to do all of the time, just in the same way that we have to do our exercise and we have to eat our fruit and veg. Looking after your mental health, kind of almost being preventative, is really, really important. And then it just helps you to identify, well, hang on a minute, I'm not feeling that great today, and having the tools to be able to sort yourself out. So obviously most of the children who come to us on those school trips are not necessarily suffering from a mental health condition, but it is about preserving their well-being and giving them that boost within that week and with that adventure. And we get a lot of feedback from teachers who say that the kids were still just talking about it weeks and weeks later. We had a group who came in at the end of September, and the teacher literally just said this was exactly what the children needed after lockdown, after COVID, to just go and enjoy that space, enjoy being with each other. It's more than what they can be offered in the classroom. And I'm not trying to compare the two, because obviously school is great and they have the curriculum to follow, but what we can do is just provide that little bit of lift and that little bit of sparkle for them, which can really help them.
And in terms of the steps you've taken in regards to well-being, you could arguably say a zoo, a safari park could maintain almost like the Jurassic Park model of come and look at these wonderful animals that we've got. And you could bank on that, and you could keep the people coming through the doors based on that. But you've obviously chosen to sort of utilise what you've got to shape that conversation around well-being. Was that a big cultural shift, or was that just an idea that worked, or were you responding to a need that was out there?
Do you know what? That's a good question. I think because we've been so invested in that approach now for so long, I'm almost going to say it's a bit of chicken and egg situation to kind of think, well, how did this start? I think certainly we are aware that although most people are behind zoos, safaris and aquariums, and we do hugely important work for conservation, it's now 2020. We are living in a different world to when zoos were first created, and we, like any business, like any aspect of society, we have to evolve and change and keep up with meeting demands. And I think certainly for us, being within Knowsley, which is by and large a very deprived borough, we thought, okay, well, how can we say with what's the word I'm looking for? Almost kind of honestly and ethically, this is why we're here. This is why we're part of the community. And I think we felt, although conservation was one answer, it wasn't the only answer. So we started to look a little bit more outward and think, well, hang on a minute, what else can we offer? And as I said, in terms of the experiences that we provide our guests and with the programs we lead through the education department, we've seen the effect that being close to animals and being outside can have on people. And by that, I mean, you can see the way people light up around our animals. I remember there was this young lad who came to do one of our programs who didn't speak for about 3 days. He was incredibly shy, about 15, and we took him in to meet our rhinos. And then let me tell you, once you've tickled a rhino's ear, I mean, they steal your hearts forever. And we kind of just encouraged him around the animals. And then I remember that on the 4th day, he suddenly just started chatting and he came out of his shell, and his confidence and who he was just completely changed. And I certainly felt that animals can have that power, but actually we need to shape the conversation, shape our programs, shape our profile to actually say, look, mental health and wellbeing is something that we do really well. And I think we always did it. We just didn't know we did it, if that makes sense.
No.
So now, yeah.
Absolutely. I was going to say that reminds me. My mum tells a story. My mum was a teacher for decades, and she tells a story about a school trip, and there was a little boy who was very shy, very quiet. It may have been Blackpool Zoo or where they went, and they got off the coach and the first few animals, and the little boy every time went, "Look, a dog," because he didn't know animals. All he knew was that it was an animal, and the only animal he knew was a dog. So my mum, she basically just grabbed him by the hand and took him round the whole zoo, showing him these things that he'd never seen before, because the awe and the inspiring nature of what he was seeing was just every single step of the day was something which was expanding this kid's mind, and actually then it turns into a different child who's seen something of the world that they never got that opportunity before. And actually, great memories because you saw some animals, but actually in that case a life-changing moment, which wasn't just positive for him, but my mum, a teacher, who's seen it all within that sort of classroom environment, to have that experience as well was very special for her.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're exactly right. And I think we just felt capturing all that and kind of using that to create a strategy and to create programs which were more people focused, because of, well, like I say, we still want to focus on the environment and the conservation, so we've not left that behind. But our strategy that currently exists is that it's kind of half kind of conventional conservation, if you will, and half of it is just purely people focused, and mental health and well-being plays a huge part in that. And so that hopefully that we can say 10, 15, 20 years down the line, oh yeah, Knowsley Safari, it's about conservation, but they also do these great programs for people as well, and that we actually have a new and modern purpose within the local community, and hopefully for zoos in general, as we move forward, through the decades, our social purpose has changed and it's gone beyond conservation. And I think it should. I think it needs to evolve beyond just being about conservation.
Well, here's a silly question, but it's the Christmas special, so I'm going to get away with it. You guys are, conservation work, but when you're dealing with like large animals and these incredible sort of jungle or prairie beasts, whatever they are, it's not just about making sure they've got enough food. It's about looking after them, making sure they're comfortable. And actually, and here's the silly question, isn't that about mental health, the mental health and well-being of the animals? And presumably that's had to be a factor for you guys, and in all sort of zoo formats from day one, making sure that the animals are feeling okay. Maybe even you considered that before we started considering the mental health of the people who are coming in through the door.
Yeah, do you know what? Absolutely. Yeah, it's something that we do have to look out for in our animals. We don't probably describe it as mental health. We describe it as ensuring that animals display their natural behaviours, is probably the way that we say it. But essentially it means the same thing. So it can be in the way that we design exhibits. It's just not okay to give them sort of a square enclosure, stick a plant in and a water trough. That's just not acceptable, not only because that's not how they live in the wild, but we want them to be mentally stimulated, to be showing those natural behaviours. And we also provide enrichment for the animals as well, so that can be things like puzzle feeders or novel items. So for animals like the wolves and the lions who love smells, we give them smell boxes, and it just encourages them to think, oh wow, what's this? And it's a similar kind of idea, that novelty, that stimulation that we need as humans as well, those animals need as well, in order to kind of have a fulfilled life.
Yeah, and actually, and we need that absolutely as humans, don't we? We need those perks. We know, we've got the four walls, and we all know what the four walls look like given the lockdown. But actually, it's about what's beyond that as well. What's going to enhance the experience that we have today? And I'm not saying that we should learn from the animals in regard to that one, but we think about that when it comes to the animals, because we have to, because of the sort of the nature of the environment in which you work. But actually, sometimes as human beings, we don't do that. We just presume that we're all just going to carry on as we are. But sometimes you need the smell box. And that smell box might be in human form. A day out, it might be a walk in the park, it might be a run, it may be, a new skill, it may be, a dance class or something like that.
Exactly. And I think thinking about when we do sort of present these programs to people, there was obviously, of course, a big interest in mental health and well-being. But I cannot deny the fact that obviously when I play the Knowsley Safari name, people are immediately interested because of that, like, oh yeah, that's a bit interesting and novel. And with some of the programs that we've run, so we've run a program it would have been last year now. I'm so confused because 2020 has just kind of disappeared. We ran with Mind St Helens, and the activities that these ladies did with us, some of them were social, some of them were outside. They were obviously close to the animals as well, but some of them were just really cool behind the scenes experiences. And do you know what, I think if we can do that and then we can make those ladies go, oh wow, this was amazing, we've just fed a giraffe today, or we've just seen this, that novelty is okay to use, because that's just part of our armor. And why wouldn't we use it if it does improve health and well-being, and also I think just gives them that connection to that animal. So it doesn't matter which part of it is the part that makes it work, or actually maybe it's just saying that everything together has that overall effect on people.
Equally, there may be organisations across the Northwest who are thinking there's an element of our sort of offer that maybe is missing a bit. Is that something that you'd be keen to build on sort of next year and beyond, working with those other organisations to say, well, here's how we can play our part in whatever your particular offer is?
Yeah, absolutely. We are always on the lookout for new partners. We love a pilot project. So if anyone is happy to kind of come along and give something a go, we would love to hear from you. It's a big part of our strategy moving forward, because we think more than ever, because of COVID, it is needed now. We need these programs in place. But as we've sort of said right from the beginning, if we just pop something on our website and say, oh, by the way, come on down, it's a bit jarring. So actually, if there's organisations who have perhaps already got an audience or got an interest or who want something a bit different from crocheting, or I don't know, something that's a little bit novel, then yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Not that there's anything wrong with crocheting.
Absolutely not. No.
And I think actually even people listening to this now many of them work in those organisations will think, oh, maybe there is something that we can do. Maybe it's like a day out, knowing that it's not just going to be a day out safari park, that you guys are also minded to the fact and sympathetic to the fact that they're achieving something through their own organisations as well. And I guess presumably that means you can shape certain experiences to those needs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can be very, very flexible and work with all groups and organisations so that we've got joint outcomes. So if they have a particular area they want to focus on, or a particular group, or an age group, or anything like that, then we're very amenable to being able to shape things. And like I say, I love a pilot project, which I think is code for let's just get stuck in and see what happens. But we're game with that, because we want to be innovative, we want to be creative, and every time we've done something like that previously, it's been very successful. And I think that's because it's never too much of a risk, because we trust the animals, we trust the location of the safari park, and I have got this amazing, vibrant team of educators who can create this atmosphere that anybody would feel safe and secure in their visit, and enjoy themselves and get something out of. Absolutely.
You mentioned the reaction of the children before. Let's just go through some of the big hits. What's the sort of the enclosure? What are the animals that get the loudest reaction from
it's
children?
got to be the monkeys, absolutely. Which, I mean, I have to admit, they're not my favourites. When we sort of pull up there with a coach, I'm always a bit like, oh, it's not my favourite. But you literally turn your microphone off and just kind of cover your hands over your ears, because the kids will be screaming. They will be delighted and fascinated with those animals. And I think the lions as well are also a massive hit. And I have to admit, I mean, I've been at the safari park 10 years now. But when that lion just kind of walks past your window, it does just make your heart skip a beat, because you're like, wow, this is really close. And my personal favourite is the rhinos. I think there's something amazing about them as an animal. But for the wider guests, I think it's the monkeys and the lions that get the reactions.
Do you ever notice where there's like almost like a silence, like a stunned, I can't believe what I'm looking at?
Sometimes when we do things closer up, so we do have some animals that we use in our classroom sessions, and that's always really interesting to see the reactions of thinking that the kids are like, oh my God, it's right there. And that's really lovely. And it never gets boring seeing people's reactions to things, even though you've done that probably 10-30 times that week. It's always nice to see those individual reactions, and I think that's what we find as rewarding as educators, to see that and just soak that up.
Yeah, and of course I've got to ask you, you don't have reindeer, do you?
Do you know what? We have got so many different species of deer, but we don't actually have reindeer. We've got fallow deer, we've got Pet David's deer, but no, we don't have any reindeer.
Yeah, they see. If anyone's listening now and wondering, because they've all been borrowed, because the North Pole has its needs at this time of year.
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
Like I say, it's a Christmas special. We just keep working that in. How disruptive has 2020 been for you guys? I know that was sort of with the tiering systems and the way that attractions were closed, despite the sort of varying nature of how those attractions work. It must have been incredibly frustrating a year for you at the safari park.
I think, yeah, and do you know what? I think I would say it's been the same for everyone. I don't think you've met anyone that's been like, yeah, this has been a tip-top year. But I think something that I'm immensely proud of for my team and also the safari park as a whole is just our resilience to keep going and to knuckle down. And we're still here and we're still welcoming visitors, which is amazing. It's very, very weird having such a vast site and not having people around. It's very, very eerie. And also knowing that we can get back to doing the conservation and the education work. It's been tough, but we're okay. And I think, we've come through this. We'll be, we're refreshed. We've got a new focus and more determined than ever to kind of continue with our goals.
I guess as well, the animals didn't know or care if there was coronavirus or if staff were potentially being furloughed, or indeed if anyone was actually coming into the park. They presumably still had the exact same needs of food and the conservation. I guess that just had to continue anyway.
Exactly, absolutely, yeah. So we can obviously do what we can using furlough schemes, obviously during the first lockdown, but you cannot furlough everybody because the animals need to be looked after and they need that same standard of care. So from that point of view, they wouldn't have noticed. I mean, obviously we can never ask them, did they notice the cars weren't there? Some people will argue differently depending on this species or depending on your perspective, but we closed Monday, Tuesday during the winter anyway, so I don't know whether they just thought it was a really, really long period. I don't know.
Imagine you just put all the monkeys on furlough. Sorry, lads, you're all going on furlough for a bit. Come back in 6 months and we'll see where we get up. But it's a fascinating sort of insight actually in terms of how you guys have sort of shaped mental health and well-being into the work that you do, and about how the work that you do has sort of shaped that as well. But also, as you mentioned, within the area and the borough of Knowsley, where there's a need and a demand for that sort of service as well. And I've got a feeling that as people think about getting out in nature or going for a walk or going to see something different, you can understand where they would maybe in the future join the dots and think of an attraction like your own to sort of embrace all of those things, seeing something new, doing something different, doing something that's a little bit novel. And actually for a lot of people that might be quite close to their doorstep. It doesn't involve travelling miles or jumping on a plane.
Yeah, I really hope so. I think it's something that we are very committed to moving in this direction, and hopefully that obviously it is unfortunate that the need is greater now because of the pandemic, but I think, like I say, our determination to kind of push forward with these programs is even greater than ever. So hopefully we can have a very positive 2021.
Nikki Burton Mallott, thanks for joining us on Mental Health Monday.
Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Thanks for checking out Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Mick Coyle. You can also find me, Mick Coyle, on Facebook as well. Don't forget, if you want to speak to somebody about your mental health, you can do so. The Samaritans, free to call on 116 123. You can find mental health services where you are. Just look for the Hub of Hope. Type in your postcode. It'll find those mental health services close to you. And for support in a crisis, you can text SHOUT to 85258. That's if you're experiencing a personal crisis, you're unable to cope and need support. Shout to 85258. That's a text line. Do get involved in those services. In an absolute emergency, always remember the number to call is 999.